Hi people, Daniel from Devil & Sons Guitars here, and today I'm going to be talking about everyday maintenance that you can carry out on your bass guitar. So behind me here is one of the first attempts of making a Shattercaster guitar. Shattercasters are a range of guitars I've made quite a lot of since trying this one out. This one was actually made from parts of old basses, put together. Things didn't quite fit, but I sort of jigged them up, and it plays really well. I've used it live lots and lots of times, but I've actually got it out now because what I'm going to be doing is totally stripping it and giving it a better paint job, giving it a better finish. It was my first attempt at doing this shattered mirror effect, and I know how to do it much better now, so I'm going to repolish the front of this and actually change the colour of it quite a bit. I'm sure there'll be some videos of that coming up, but while I've got it out, I think it's a good example of how to maintain your guitar, everyday tips you need to do. So let's get down to the workbench and have a close look at things you can do on this. I'm not going to talk about full setup and what everyday things you can do, but I will be making a full setup video, so do like and subscribe if you want to see that coming. Now, one of the first things I recommend doing is just using a microfiber cloth like this, or sometimes I use lint-free cloths, just to wipe down your guitar basically after every time you play it. You can go over the strings and the fretboard. This guitar has been used quite a lot in the past, but it's also been left on display in my workshop, and there's quite a lot of dust building up under here. But even just the microfiber cloth as it is, without any polish, cleans it up. And I would absolutely recommend you don't use polish most times when you wipe it down. Polish is something you use every now and then. On your day-to-day playing after a gig, there might be some sweat, there might be some drink, depending how you play, there might be some blood on it. I mean, that will probably come off with the cloth. I don't know about the blood. But the polish is something you use just every now and then to really give it an extra solid clean. So I would say every 7 or 8 cleans, maybe when you're not doing it straight after a gig, you could do that at home when there's a bit more space and a bit more time. But just a general wipe down is really simple. So from this angle you can really see the dust that's built up over time, but even that's built up over time, the microfiber cloth really gets rid of it quite easily. So essentially, if you're doing this every time you play, you really shouldn't have a build up like that. If you do start getting a build up that's hard to come off, that's really grimed on, that's when you might use a polish. Like I said before, you don't want to use a polish every time. There are so many different polishes out there. This one, where the writing's basically washed off the packet because I left the lid off when it was in a bag, is a Gibson Luthier high gloss polish. Now, if you're going to use a polish, and I'll leave some links below for the different types of polish you can use, so many different companies make them, don't put it straight on the body. This one is a drip on one, some of them are spray on. You want to, with any polish, when you're polishing anything, put it on your cloth first. That helps you control it more when you spread it round, and then rub that down over the body. Any guitar body with a finish on, you can polish. Now, although I think wiping down the strings with a cloth each time isn't probably enough, it might be worth using some sort of string cleaner as well. So here I've got, again from that set that I used with the polish, a string cleaner from Gibson. I would normally just apply it with a little bit onto the rag like this, and then just wipe over the strings. You can get different makes. There's something called Fast Fret, which is great. They sell different versions. Again, I'll put links below. And I've also got this Boston Hot Shots string maintenance set that I've got, which again does basically the same thing. You can just push it out and rub over the strings. It's got a sort of felt block on it which is impregnated with the lubricant, just to clean up your strings. Next thing to do is really think about tightening things up on your guitar. So here we've got the input jack, and actually I'm just going to, these volume knobs just pull off. So if I pull it off, then we can expose the volume part underneath. Some volume knobs will pull off like that. Some might have a little Allen key or a screw key in them that you can unscrew to pull them off. These are things that get loose a lot. So this one actually is fine. But if you imagine, I'm turning this all the way around to its maximum positions. And if it wasn't tight, then it would keep turning because the pot would be loose. Now, if the pot is loose and turns, first of all, you're not going to get as good a control over your changing volume and tone when you're playing, because sometimes you'll be turning and the pot will be turning and not the actual shaft itself. So you won't be making a change to the tone or volume, you'll just be turning the whole pot round. The other problem with that is if you're turning the pots around underneath, you can start pulling on the wires underneath, so you'll be basically at the risk of tearing them or pulling them off, breaking a solder joint. Now you can get various tools to do this with. This luthier tool has a grip on it which allows you to put it around the nut and turn it. Now I quite like this as a tool, it's quite useful, but it does have a risk of this edge scratching on the guitar, especially on cheap ones. So you've got to be really careful with that. I also sometimes use something like this, which can just slot over the top of your pot and tighten it, and loosen it, tighten it. It's basically just from a wrench set. I put a little plug in the end so I can put it in my screwdriver if needed to. Or you could just use a normal pair of pliers. Something like this, just to turn it. I could hold the shaft and turn it like this. Now this is a really important one to check, the input jack. They get loose all the time because you're pulling your lead in and out. It's going to really put pressure on this. So this one is actually quite loose. I can turn it with my fingers, you can see. Now when I made this guitar I didn't have a black one, so I just painted it black. In fact I painted this scrap pickguard black as well. What I'm going to do with this is try to tighten it just using a pair of pliers. I could use these tools that I talked about before, but I don't want the whole of the jack inside to turn. So one trick for doing that, which sometimes works, is to put a lead into your jack to hold it in place and then tighten around it. Quite tricky to do with the camera there. There we go. Another thing to look at is the strap pins. Now this one is in nice and tight already, but it's worth just having a look at them after every time you practice, because I've been on stage before and my strap pin has actually come loose and fallen off and I've dropped my bass. Not the best thing, especially when I'm using strap lock clips. So the strap is clipped really tightly to the strap pin, but the strap pins come out of the body. What a waste of time, and what an oversight not to check. I would also always just have a quick look at the screws on each saddle that adjust the string height, if you have them. Not all saddles will have them. Now you don't need to tighten them or loosen them, because that obviously adjusts the action and you've probably got that set up how you want. Like I said, I have a setup video coming, so keep an eye out for that. But you can kind of feel if they're coming loose. And if they're coming loose because you're obviously playing the guitar a lot, there's a lot of vibration happening here, they could jiggle loose a bit, that's when you might need to just screw it back tight in place a bit, or double check it hasn't come out too much, in which case you will have to check your action again. It doesn't happen that often, but it is something that could happen. You can basically feel it with your finger, or you can just push on the saddle and see if it wobbles. So I think the last thing to check are the machine heads or the tuning pegs. Now obviously all guitars can have different types of tuning pegs, but most of them are going to have screws on the back that hold them in place, and you need to just check. You can check with your fingers or just move the tuning peg a bit, check it's not loose. If any of these are loose you can tighten them. The reason you want to check it's not loose is if this has any movement in it at all, it can cause issues with the tuning. Won't necessarily definitely cause it, but it could cause it, because obviously if this is going to move a bit it would affect the positioning of the pole on the other side that the strings go through. Also you might want to just check that on screws like this with the elephant ears that the screw here is tight enough, because if this gear starts slipping then again that can cause issues, not necessarily with the tuning, but when you're turning the tuning peg it might not be as responsive. I'm just switching over to a different bass guitar for a moment. This is actually another one that I play live a lot. It's also one that I've made a custom scratch plate for when I first got it, really before I got into properly working on guitars and setting up Devil & Sons as a business. And if you stay tuned to my YouTube channel, at some point in the future I'm going to have a new video up where I'm making a new scratch plate for this. But this one has bushings that screw into place. Now these are all screwed down nice and tight. But what you can find is if these come loose, it can cause two problems. First of all, if it comes loose, it can cause the shaft to start wobbling a bit. Again, that might cause tuning issues. But also if it comes loose, the washer underneath is then going to rattle when you're playing, which can be quite annoying. So you always want to just have a quick check that these are tight. And this one as well, on its tuning pegs, has screws on the end, as you can see just here. Now you want to check that's tight as well. If it was loose, let me just loosen one as an example. if it was loose, then it might turn and not necessarily turn the peg itself. It might be a bit too loose, so you might again have not so responsive a tuning peg. So you want to check this is tight. Basically, you want to just keep tightening everything. So thanks for watching that. I hope you found it useful. Do leave any comments in the video below if you've got any tips for other viewers of things that are useful for your everyday maintenance. And don't forget, I have got another video that I'll be making very soon of a full setup of a bass guitar with some other things that you really should be trying to carry out on your guitar every now and then to keep it in tip-top playing condition. So like and subscribe to see that when it comes, or if you're watching sometime in the future after I've made this video, you can probably go back and watch it. I'm also on various social media, so it'd be great if you can follow me there, and you can support me on things like Redbubble, where you can buy my merch, or you can buy direct from me through my websites, through Facebook, or even if you want, you can contact me to commission a brand new guitar to your own specs and designs. The more weird, the better as far as I'm concerned. But until then, happy strumming.